This is how passengers arriving on the Northern Pacific Railway saw Fargo 100 years ago. The dirt road crossing the tracks would one day be Broadway. Fargo was a fast-growing town of 600 hardy pioneer people. Like all frontier towns, the buildings were mainly wood. The city water supply had not been installed, and wood was used for cooking and heating purposes. So it was natural that fire was the number one menace to the city. No building was really safe from fire. The Headquarters Hotel, one of the Northwest's finest, had burned to the ground in 1874. So when George Egbert became Fargo's first mayor, he appointed 2 fire wardens for the city. This was on April 12, 1875, and marked the beginning of the Fargo Fire Department. A bucket brigade was formed, and water was supplied by barrels and wells. The Northern Pacific had a tank car filled with water in case a fire broke out. The year after the founding of the department, this block-long area of Front Street burned. The loss, $12,000. Main Avenue at Broadway and the adjoining park looked like this when the city council, at the mayor's urging, passed the first fire ordinance in 1877. They paid $475 for a hand-drawn hook and ladder wagon. There was no fire station at that time, so the wagon sat outside. Soon the ladders and equipment were scattered all around the city. The wagon was useless. The following year brought another conflagration on Front Street. Fire destroyed this newspaper office, the Republican, the clothing store, and Charlie Mitchell's saloon. Directly across the street and threatened by the blaze was the elegant new Headquarters Hotel, built on the same site as its burned-out predecessor. It escaped the older building's fate, at least for a time. By 1880, Fargo was looking more and more like a metropolitan area. It was one of the first in America to have electricity, and first in the territory to have a complete water system. Fargo's fire equipment was gathered in a vacant lot with a rickety scaffolding over it covered with hay. 2 volunteer fire companies had been organized. These are the men of Hook and Ladder Number 1 Hard, named after North Dakota's famous hard spring wheat. A volunteer company of 25 energetic and civic-minded men with eyes peeled for the telltale wisp of smoke or the flicker of flame, and ever ready to fight fire day or night. The Continental Hose Company was another band of steely-eyed young men, reorganized by members of Fargo's original volunteer company, the Pioneers. The Continental built their hose house on Front Street. Responsibility for fire protection during these times rested with these volunteers. To occupy themselves as a unit and maintain physical fitness, these companies formed running teams and often posed in their athletic uniforms. John Hagrid was Fargo's first fire chief. By 1883, the Number 1 Hard Company had settled in their new fire hall on the site of Fargo's present fire headquarters. 1883 saw the birth of still another hose company, which consisted of many young businessmen of the city. Named after the mayor, W.A. Yerxa, the Yerxa Hose Company became famous running with hand-drawn hose carts and setting a world record for speed in 1890. They competed against many other companies in fire department tournaments. By 1884, The department had 3 hand-drawn hose carts like these. The hand-drawn hook and ladder, a horse-drawn hook and ladder truck, and a patrol wagon. 100 volunteers were headed by a paid fire chief and assistant. This was the maintenance wagon for the telegraph fire alarm system, one of Fargo's earliest devices for fire alerting. In 1889, a horse-drawn hose wagon was added to the equipment. The Rescue Hook and Ladder Company was formed after the No. 1 Hard Company had disbanded. During firemen's tournaments, the city was elaborately decorated. These were always big celebrations. These huge arches were tributes to the volunteer teams, who were the town's real heroes, doing a dangerous but vital job. In 1893, Fargo was a metropolis of 12,000 people. Broadway stretched for many blocks to the north. Looking south on Broadway, it can be easily seen how many wooden frame buildings lined the street, a condition which soon would be permanently changed. Because on June 7th, 1893, a fire would start in this area of Front Street that would rapidly spread and become the biggest fire in Fargo's history. This is one of the few pictures that have survived of the Great Fargo Fire of 1893. It shows the start of the fire on Front Street. It was directly across from the office of the Continental Hose Company and the Rescue Hook and Ladder Company, which unfortunately had their horse and driver pulling the sprinkler wagon for the streets in another part of town. The fire started here at Hersman's store, which was ignited by a trash fire behind it. It was a hot, windy day. Before the fire had run its course, it had spread west, east, and north. As many as 200 buildings could be seen burning at once. The 3 Fargo fire companies had no way of stopping the conflagration, even with the help of fire companies from Wahpeton, Grand Forks, Castleton, and Moorhead. The fire bell, which originally sounded the alarm, had fallen into the rubble that was once Fargo's finest fire station. Hoses and other equipment were destroyed. One fireman lost his life in the department's desperate losing battle with the fire. The following day, Fargo's main business section was a complete ruin, resembling a World War II city after a fire bombing. 31 blocks of the city were totally destroyed. The loss was estimated from $2 to $5 million. 6.5 miles of wooden sidewalk was destroyed. Once this beautiful hotel, the Columbia, could boast of being the city's first fireproof building. After the fire, there were plenty of vacancies, but not much business. This building had housed the city's offices, as well as the Citizens National Bank. After the fire, only the vault remained to mark the place where the bank had stood. The $80,000 Keeney block, built by one of Fargo's original settlers, was also destroyed. The red demarcation lines on this old Fargo print show graphically the size of the devastation. After the day's citizenry had pulled themselves together and got a good look at what happened, they realized they had a lot of hard work ahead of them rebuilding the city. Following the fire, there was a building boom which erupted in Fargo. Within a year's time, the city, for all practical purposes, was rebuilt. 246 new buildings went up in that time, built with brick and stone. No more wooden frame construction fire traps in the business district. In this group portrait of former Fargo Fire Chief, the man in the upper left corner is C.B. Wade, who became Fargo's chief the day before the Great Fire. A former member of the Yerxa Hose Company, he later became the chief of police. A new fire hall was built on the site of the old building on NP Avenue. New and better equipment was purchased. Larger water mains were installed under the city to better fight future fires. There was ample room on the station's second floor to house members of all 3 volunteer fire companies. For the first time, they shared common quarters. A Gamewell fire alarm system with 17 boxes was installed for over $3,000. This would mean protection for the new homes, which had also been going up during this time, built of wood. One of the few Broadway survivors of the Great Fargo Fire was the Headquarters Hotel. On the afternoon of June 13, 1897, the old wooden structure was consumed by fire. It burned out of control for 2 hours. Nothing remained but a heap of smoldering ruins. It would never be rebuilt. A new Fargo was beginning to take shape in 1897. New buildings in the foreground included the new fire hall seen from behind. Other areas untouched by the Fargo fire remained the same. Some of the buildings on South 8th Street are still standing today. The Great Fargo Fire of 1893 was commemorated by highly publicized fire festivals. Held annually for many years, the date eventually became a state holiday. A log rolling contest and other competitions attracted big crowds. Special attractions were brought in for the occasion. But the main event was the big parade, with colorful costumes and floats. Naturally, the fire department also took part. It was a good time to display the new firefighting equipment. The fire department was proud of its equipment, some of the best for its day. A chemical wagon at the turn of the century consisted of a load of fire extinguishers. Sometimes the wagons were decorated for special occasions. Ladder trucks like these were important pieces of equipment. (1903) ushered in a new period for the fire department. Full-time, paid personnel, in addition to the volunteers. This room on the second floor of the firehouse was their home for their shifts with 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Grouped before the newly built Carnegie Library, firemen display their equipment. In 1904, this horse-drawn steamer is the department's latest acquisition. In 1905, the following year, Fargo's City Hall was built next to the fire station, completing a corner familiar to generations of Fargo people. In 1909, the department acquired an American LaFrance aerial wagon, which answered many a hurried call. The ability of the wagon to erect a tall ladder was instrumental in saving another famous Fargo hotel from destruction. The following year, in 1910, Fargo got a second fire station. This building presently houses the Fargo Park Board. The total value of buildings and equipment by 1913 was almost $30,000, and the department had a staff of 14 men. In 1916, the Fargo Fire Department got this spiffy motorized fire truck. The age of the horse-drawn vehicles was on the way out. Motorization of the Fargo Fire Department was complete in 1919. The horse-drawn equipment was hauled by the trucks when needed. Firemen in 1919 didn't have much time to sit around and relax. But this was the year a two-platoon system was initiated, affording relief to these hard-working firefighters. 2 shifts of 10 and 14 hours instead of one 24-hour one. In 1924, another pumper was added with a 1,000-gallon capacity. Joining the department in 1930 was this new fire truck, which now rests in the Fire Hall Museum in Bonanzaville. The history of the service rendered to the city of Fargo through the years contains many stories of disaster and tragedy, which would have been much worse without the courage and efficiency of this modern firefighting team. All these buildings are still in use today. This was the Golden Maid Cafe fire of 1941, which burned out the entire block. In 1943, fire destroyed the Cheney Everhart building, which was used as a warehouse. By that time, the 1909 horse-drawn aerial wagon had a motorized front end. But during the Glendenning fire in 1948, a ladder of the old wagon broke, causing a fireman to lose his life. New equipment was delivered soon after and was proudly posed with additions for this equipment portrait made in the winter of 1949. Here is a span of over 30 years of motorized firefighting equipment, from the 1916 museum piece to the latest equipment of the late 40s, purchased on a $75,000 bond issue for new equipment. In 1948, members of the fire department posed for this group portrait. And this one was made 4 years later, in 1952, as the department shows off their new uniforms. The Fargo Fire Department uniforms have gone through an evolution over the years. And the equipment used by the department changes as well. Firemen have to keep abreast of the latest techniques. And in 1955, this Chemox oxygen-breathing mask was the latest in new equipment. In recent memory, one of the most notable fires was at Coleman's store on Broadway, when the full force of the Fargo Fire Department's men and equipment was brought to bear to contain the blaze. Today, the Fargo Fire Department numbers 85. It is headed by Chief W.T. Stewart, who has served in that capacity for almost a decade. Staff meetings for the executive officers are held every 3 weeks to discuss equipment requirements and other fire department business. This new type fire helmet will soon be worn by all firefighting personnel in the department. Gordon Ness, Deputy Chief, is the coordinator of the numerous branches and divisions of the department. Lansford Josel heads up the A shift of the fire division. Merle Ledoux is chief of the B shift, and William Sparky is the boss of the C shift. The 3 shifts are made up of 24 men each. Alice Westra is the fire department's Girls Friday. Harold Martinson is in charge of all fire prevention activities. The new downtown fire station is the 3rd fireman's building to be built on this site in Fargo's history. It is one of 4 fire stations strategically placed in different parts of the city. The North Side Station on 10th Street runs a 4-man crew and a pumper. Another station on Fargo's South Side also maintains a pumper and a 4-man crew. Fargo's West Side Fire Station is a training center, too. In addition to a pumper and crew, this building is headquarters for a vigorous learning program of firefighting skills, headed by Director of Training, Alvin Petrie. Training sessions for young firemen and refresher courses for seasoned firefighters are carried on throughout the year. A training tower gives first-hand knowledge of rescue work and familiarity with the equipment. It is much easier to conquer a fear of heights here than at a blazing hotel or office building. Summer brings on added responsibility of river rescue, so the fire department trains its members in this operation as well. In training sessions, young firemen learn all the ins and outs of modern firefighting. They learn to operate equipment from the smallest fire extinguisher to the largest truck. The prevention of fires is an important part of today's firefighting program. This includes a free home fire safety inspection for Fargoans every 2 years. The possible fire hazards that have been discovered and pointed out to homeowners have drastically reduced the number of domestic fires. Company inspections are made by fire crews of business establishments in the city. This also helps firemen become familiar with the building in the case that a fire should occur. But most of the fire prevention inspections are carried out by members of the Fire Prevention Bureau. And when a fire does happen, the people of Fargo can be sure that it will be extinguished quickly and expertly by this confident and well-trained company of dedicated and efficient firefighters, many of whom have given their lives in the line of duty. These are the inheritors of the grand tradition of service that has grown over the last 100 years. A tradition that can be proudly carried forward into the future of the Fargo Fire Department.